The storm had already rolled in over the dusty plains when the screams began again. The ranch lay miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by endless fields and the echo of thunder rolling across the sky. Inside a crumbling shack at the edge of that land, a woman lay curled on the dirt floor. Her lips split, her dress torn, and her body trembling from the last strike that had fallen. Her name was Anna, though few called her that anymore. To her husband, she was a burden. To her neighbors, she was cursed. To the town, she was a story they whispered about, a woman who had given birth to 3 daughters and had brought bad luck to a man obsessed with a son. Her cries had long gone unheard, muffled by the sound of rain hitting the roof and the cruel laughter of the man who once vowed to protect her. He stormed out again that night, slamming the door so hard that the wood splintered. "You gave me nothing but girls," he spat before disappearing into the darkness. Anna dragged herself to the corner where 3 little girls huddled under a torn quilt, their eyes wide and wet with fear. She pressed her trembling hand to their cheeks and whispered, "It's okay, my loves. Mama's here." But deep down, she knew she couldn't stay much longer, not if she wanted her daughters to live. Across the valley, under the flicker of lightning, a tall figure rode through the storm. Ethan Cole. The rancher everyone called the Giant wasn't a man of many words. His frame was massive, his shoulders broad enough to carry half the town's burdens. And his heart, though scarred by his own past, had never hardened. He was the kind of man who didn't speak of right or wrong. He just did what needed to be done. And that night, when his horse startled at the sound of distant cries, he felt something stir deep inside him, an old pain, a familiar fire. He turned his horse toward the sound without a second thought. When he reached the shack, lightning flashed, revealing the broken door and the figure of a woman, shielding her daughters with her body. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, and froze when she saw him, a towering man, soaked by rain, his shadow filling the doorway. "Please," she whispered, "don't hurt us." Ethan dismounted and stepped inside slowly, his boots sinking into the mud. His voice was deep, quiet, almost gentle. "I ain't here to hurt you, ma'am." I heard screaming. His eyes scanned the room, the overturned table, the bruises on her face, the fear in her children's eyes. Then his jaw clenched. He didn't need to ask what happened. "Where's your husband?" he asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence said enough. Ethan's hand tightened around his hat brim before he finally said, "You can't stay here." The woman's eyes widened in confusion. "I have nowhere else to go," she said weakly. "He'll come back soon." Ethan crouched down to her level, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers through the dim light. "Then you're coming with me." She stared at him, stunned. "You don't even know me," she murmured. He shook his head. "Don't need to. I know what kind of man leaves marks like that. I ain't letting him put another one on you." His voice carried a strength that made her chest tighten. Not with fear, but with a strange flicker of hope. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her not with pity, not with disgust, but with humanity. He wrapped his old ranch coat around her shoulders, lifted her daughters one by one onto his horse, and led them through the rain toward his ranch. The wind howled, the sky roared. But inside her heart there was a quietness, a trembling sense of freedom she'd never known. When they arrived, the girls were asleep, their tiny faces resting against their mother's chest. Ethan carried them inside and lit a lantern. His home was simple but warm, a fire crackling, the smell of bread lingering in the air. "You can stay here tonight," he said, placing blankets near the hearth. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out what comes next." She nodded. Too weak to speak, too overwhelmed to thank him. The days that followed were quiet, healing. Ethan didn't ask questions. He just worked. He fed the horses, repaired fences, and brought food to the table. Anna helped where she could, though her body was slow to recover. Sometimes she'd catch him glancing at her, not in judgment, but in quiet reassurance. As if to say, "You're safe here." Her daughters began to laugh again, chasing the ranch dogs across the yard, their giggles filling the air that once echoed only with silence. But peace is never permanent for those running from pain. One afternoon, a horse galloped up the dirt road, the same man who had left her bleeding on the floor. He dismounted with a bottle in hand and rage in his eyes. "You think you can take my wife, rancher?" he spat. "She's mine." Ethan stepped forward, towering over him. "She ain't yours if you treat her like that," he said calmly. The men sneered. "She's my wife. My property." The next moment was a blur. The men swung, but Ethan didn't flinch. He caught his arm midair, his grip like iron. "A woman ain't property," he growled. "She's a person. And if you can't see that, you don't deserve to call yourself a man." He released him with a shove, so hard the drunk stumbled back into the dirt. "Leave. Now." The man cursed, spat at the ground, and stumbled toward his horse. "You'll regret this, Cole," he shouted before riding off into the horizon. When the dust settled, Anna stood frozen at the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She walked toward Ethan, her voice trembling. "You could have gotten hurt. Why did you do that?" He turned toward her, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Because no one ever stood up for my mother when she needed it," he said quietly. "I swore I wouldn't let that happen again." For the first time, she saw through the rugged exterior, the pain behind his strength. Weeks turned into months. The ranch flourished again, laughter returned, and the air felt lighter. Ethan taught her daughters how to ride horses, how to plant seeds, how to be brave. Anna found herself smiling more, her heart healing with every sunrise. One evening, as the sky turned orange and gold, Ethan approached her by the fence where she stood watching her girls play. "You could start fresh, you know," he said. "This land can be yours too, if you want it." She looked at him, speechless. "Why are you doing all this for us?" His gaze softened. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, and you've fought enough battles for a lifetime." She didn't answer, but when he reached out his hand and said, "Come with me," she took it without hesitation. Not because she needed saving anymore, but because for the first time, she believed she was worth saving. Together, they walked back toward the house, the girls chasing after them, the last light of sunset spilling over the fields like gold. And as the night settled, Ethan looked at her once more and said, "No one's ever gonna hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing." She smiled through tears, whispering, "Then I'm finally home."